Good morning, everybody. How's everybody's morning going? We're just gonna drag that off to the side for right now. It was doing okay until one of my stocks crashed, so I'm kind of not happy about that. But ACN went from 42, it says 42, but it was actually 44. There was a dividend. It went from 44 all the way down to 132. Well, excuse me, 144 down to 132 within 2 sessions. So my positions on that are a little wrecked, which I'm not happy about. So the account's gonna get open pretty low today, but I'll have to figure out how to recover things. Haven't been able to check the news, but semiconductors are up almost 5% right now. Looks like it's trying to bounce off the 50 MA. So above the 5-day moving average, below the 20-day and 10-day moving average. So if it rejects in that range, that'll be pretty telling. But if it continues over that range, that's going to tell us that the market's trying to pull into a bullish posture. So today might be a boring stream because I don't know if I'm gonna day trade today. I might just be trying to look up some longer duration trades. We'll see. Now this red box right here is showing the major selling channel. It's kind of hard to see on the 5-minute time frame, but on the daily time frame, or let's just go to the hourly, you can see that's kind of where the selling channel is. Drag that up a little bit. So if we pull up to this range and then have a rejection, then we're staying within the selling channel. Now when we open today, I'll update the max pain, I'll update the gamma, show where the call and put walls are located, then we'll kind of go from there. Good morning. Sorry if I don't sound like I'm in a good mood right now. Last couple days, not even just based on the market, I've been kind of having some drama in my life, so not in the best mood today. Um, and then my stock crashing on top of it kind of was the last straw on the camel's back, so I need to figure out what's running semi so hard. I'm not finding the semiconductor news just yet. Micron's up 7%. So Micron boosts plans for investment in US to over 250 billion. Maybe that might be part of it. Oh, I guess Samsung's second or quarterly earnings were released not that long ago. Anyway, market opens in 30 seconds and we will get into it. Yeah, just dealing with the law right now, but I'll be okay. Just might sound depressing today, but it is what it is. Watching The Spy right now. So, market opened. Hold on, let me go ahead and get us our levels. So, the max pain is at the 745. Let's check 0 DTE. So currently the call wall is at 750. I'll adjust these in just a second. Put wall is at 744. Alright, call wall established, put wall established. Let's check semis. Now, even though semis are up, almost 5%. We should see this push to the 590, 598 if we're going to see bullish structure continue. Basically close that cup. So semis still have a little bit more push to them as well. But if they reject this range before filling that cup, then this will likely turn into a bearish structure. Likely some form of head and shoulders. So we'll be watching it. I'm sure it will fill the upward gap though. SPY also kind of has the same structure here. Where we have not closed the cup. So if we have a full rejection downward, then that creates an inverse cup. So we'll be watching for that as well. Yeah, I don't want the moving averages on. We are at the lower Bollinger, so if we don't continue pushing downward, that could be a good opportunity for calls. But we are at the upper Bollinger on semiconductors, and between the upper Bollinger and the 20 MA on QQQ, so I don't really like the positions just yet. So I'm going to hold my ACN positions and just pretend that it's not moving downward on me. Good morning, everybody who joined. Mainly just waiting on a position right now if we're going to take anything 0 DTE. We have QQQ telling us that basically it's time to short. We have semiconductors telling us it's basically time to short. Not yet, but very close. Kind of same with QQQ. Not yet, but very close. And then SPY is just kind of all over the place right now. Was saying to take calls at the bottom. So I want to see QQQ, semis, and SPY somewhat align. Volatility has been pulling down today. It did open at the 91.50, or it opened at the 91.29, excuse me. Pulled up towards 91.50, currently at 90.82. So sort of a neutral range, not exactly bullish or bearish right now. HIG is currently at 79.71, opened at 79.73, had a low of 79.67, but this is showing buying so far. QQQ pushed its upper Bollinger. Semis slightly pushing their upper Bollinger, but I still feel like semis are going to close that cup and close that gap. And likely up here. So when we try to find bearish structure on it. With SPY very close to pushing its upper Bollinger. So that would have been a good trade, but we did not take it. Might help if I go to the 5-minute time frame. But SPY did close that cup. Not all the way. Still missing a little bit, but very, very close. QQQ still has a lot of room before they really start closing cups on it. And we're going to delete some of these old lines here. But QQQ needs to fill that range to fill the same cup that semiconductors are trying to fill and that the SPY is trying to fill. I'm sure a lot of the selling on ACN was due to the dividend because it had like a $1.60 something dividend. Usually when the dividend happens on most stocks, they do see some selling. But regardless, it's still kind of overwhelming to deal with. Higgs seeing a little selling. VVIX still holding that 9081. Semis might be up a ton right now, but I still have that full expectation we're going to hit the top of the range. Which I think when we do, if we do hit this top of the 598, that I'm going to jump into some SOXS positions, probably about 2 weeks out. I think that's the trade that I want to take today. So I'm going to write it in this box. Let me check the strike. Because I do want to get that watch listed. So it'll probably be for July 24th. Honestly, I think I would just take the 3.5 strike. So I'm gonna get that watch listed. The 3.5 isn't too much more than the 4 strike. It would be a call. Call is assuming a bearish position when using SOXS. A put is assuming a bullish position. When is the reverse split for SOXS? I didn't know there was one coming already. I know there was reverse splits coming for a bunch of the Granite Share things, but okay, hold on. 15th. Okay, well that changes things. Um Now I'm assuming Soxol will be getting a split during that time as well. Let me check the date. So that'd be next Wednesday. I still take the position, but we'll just have to be out of it by the 14th regardless. So if we're going to absorb any price action, then we absorb it over the next few sessions. So I'll have to make a note of that. Volatility is pulling down while we have most of our stocks at the upper Bollinger, which means that very likely we're just going to continue pushing against the upper Bollinger currently. The HIG is still at the 79.71. So very likely the price action will pull down a little bit before heading back upward. But I don't want to short this just yet. I do think that a lot of these upward gaps need to be taken first. Now again, the potential could be that they just fully reject this gap, push down and start selling, but we're not seeing signals of that too much. The HIG is pulling down slightly. All went from 79.71 to 79.70, then pop back up and pop back down. So a little bit of selling in here. ECN starting to recover, which is very welcoming. Seeing a little bit of selling on QQQ within the shares right now. I know it doesn't show on your screen, but the time in sales, I have it tracked, so it's 99 shares or above. So basically 1,000 shares. Seeing a lot of sells coming through currently. Volatility ticking upward very slightly. It's at 90.77. So once we figure out the direction of everything, I'm gonna start looking over some other stocks. Not a lot of movement yet. He gets back up to the 79.73, pushing 74. Volatility at 90.68. So I think that pulled up to 90.70 something, but basically not the time to short yet. No, I didn't take any positions yet, Joseph, and welcome to the stream. It would cost more, but what I could also do here, instead of opening the contracts, is just take 100 shares. Now we do have some news coming out today. So let me go ahead and pull up my calendar. Oh, nothing important. Thought there was important news coming out today, but I guess not. Not seeing anything, so. Now this red box here looks like it's within the call wall, but it's not. Again, that's the top of the selling channel. So if we do have a really large push today, I am kind of expecting it to reject around that range. Thank you all for reminding me about that reverse split. Check the 1 minute time frame here. Just building structure to head upward, it looks like. Same thing for semis. Now the dollar is down a lot today. It's one thing I didn't really pay attention to. But just for reference, it was at the 101.80 roughly about 2 weeks ago. It's been slowly pulling down. Surprising this is pulling down when we have the, conflict back at it basically. We also see that with oil prices. They pulled down all the way from that 115 yesterday down to a 109.65 this morning, but currently down to the 110.05. So just waiting for a position here. I don't want to short at this range, because again, semiconductors really do very, very, very likely want to push towards this, 198, 199 range. And QQQ has a ton of range to push to the upside. Volatility is still pulling down, so at 90.42. So these ranges should be being reached fairly soon here. So the put wall has moved up to the 747. So let's go ahead and adjust that. Sorry, it's a big line through the middle of the screen, but it's an important line. Basically means that we should be ranging between this area. Call wall still at that 750. This makes a lot of sense to be trading in this range today. Going to delete that because we already closed that cup. Same with that. I want to look at the hourly here for a moment. So we do have an important resistance at this 749.38. Oh yeah, very likely going to push that, build some support. Seeing ACN buying back up makes me very happy. Let me tell you, I was super, super, super depressed because this isn't just in my challenge portfolio, this is in my main port, and this position was up over 25,000. It's dropped down significantly. So waking up to that was not very ideal. But seeing it recover is very welcoming. I missed the USO calls yesterday. Can I enter today? I would personally not, just because even with this conflict going on, we're just seeing it pull downward. So I think the market's trying to price in the oil glut over, or glut, whatever it's called, um, over the conflict, which is kind of weird. And what that means is basically an oversupply. And this is something I've been talking about for a couple weeks now because everybody's been telling me that, oh no, you're stupid for shorting oil. There's going to be the oil shortages and everybody's going to have to fill their stocks back up again and it's going to cause the price to move back up. Well, I disagreed with that because how the market's been trading with oil and everything, we're basically pushing down to super, super lows, even though we're not seeing it in USO just yet. We're seeing that in the CL main. We're seeing that in some of the actual, per barrel oil prices. So we've also been seeing where a lot of these shippers have been having to basically backlog a lot of these oil barrels all the way out to 2027. Okay, which means that um, this oil conflict is really not an issue for the oil industry right now. So I'm not taking any positions on the main stuff just yet. I don't want to just willy-nilly short into this. Um, Even if we do see semis up 5% right now, I think they can absolutely move, 7, 8% in a day. We've seen that happen before. So don't just assume that because it's up 5% that it's basically a free short. The HIG is still rising, so it's at 79, 75. Well, or as they say that ticks down to 74. And whereas they say that ticks up to 75, whatever. If anything, we just pull down very slightly before heading up more. At least that's what the volatility and the HIG are telling us right now. I love seeing this out of ACN because this absolutely could have just kept dropping today and making my day a lot worse than what it is. Um, so I really like seeing this. So a really good trade this morning would have been taking those calls down here, but again, I was very hesitant to do so. Just because we had the semiconductors at their upper Bollinger at the same time, and QQQ was at their upper Bollinger, so it's kind of hard to take a call position on the SPY when the other, um, indices are telling us that potentially we could be heading down. So that's the reason why I didn't take that call, even though it would have absolutely blasted off. So currently just waiting for some of these upward gaps to be filled. We're seeing somewhat bullish structure on the 1 minute time frame. On semis, we have a nice inverse head and shoulders building. Very likely take us up to that 756. Start heading down slightly again, and then push up to that 598. I might have said 796. I apologize. It's because the QQQ and SPY are in the 700. So I always make that mistake. But you all know what I mean. Tesla looks terrible right now. So in SPY, now that we did close this cup, we can be seeing form of a handle starting to build in this range. But with how bullish the market is, I kind of just don't want to short into this right now, because very likely heading up to that 750-ish range. Now we almost hit that 749.38 support or resistance range. We got off, or we were missing that level by 15 cents, which does matter. But in terms of testing the resistance, it's not exactly to the penny, so that's still somewhat testing that level. Now the ADL on semis pulled up pretty heavily this morning and down slightly. It looks like it's a lot worse than what it is right now. In terms of the money flow, this still is positive. You can see this a lot better reflected within the SPY or QQQ. I actually don't know why semiconductors are showing their ADL like that. Should look a lot closer to what SPY and QQQ are doing, but maybe that's because semis were up, 5% compared to QQQ and SPY. So volatility rising very, very slightly. So it's at 90.73. HIG is still at the 79.74, so very likely any of this downside is just to build further upside right now. Yeah, HIG is still rising through all this, so very likely any of this downside will just get pushed back up very shortly here. Now, if we do close this range to the 589.79 on semis, then that does start to create a little bit of bearish structure. It's at that 73. But if we get that range, that'll complete an inverse cut, which would be somewhat bearish. SPY, we're seeing a little bit of bearish structure, but we do kind of expect bearish structure at the top of a cup. Now that we did fill that large cup, we should be seeing some of this bearish structure completing to give us the handle downward. Volatility's at 90.88. HIG is still holding strong though. Good morning. So far not really targeting anything yet. If anything, I'm really wanting to target some stocks as positions at the top of this range. But I am gonna have to adjust this to not 2 weeks out. Because there is a reverse split coming on the 15th. So if we enter these positions, we need to be out of them by the 14th. But I do want to target the top of this 598, 599 range. Now oil should be pulling down to that 109.65 from that range, very likely building a handle to continue downward if it's going to do that. But there was a call opportunity here that I didn't take. which, can I explain why? We had semis and QQQ at the top of their upper Bollingers, which makes it not ideal for me. And we knew about the top of this cup being a good place to short, but did not take that position. Or not semis, but volatility is at 91.09. It is selling off a little bit. It's at 79.72. Or as they say that, it jumps back up to 79.73. Now, semis did complete the smaller inverse cup here. So it is building a little bit of bullish structure. We'll see if this continues into further downside, because this is kind of exactly how you do that. Or as I mentioned that, the handle starts breaking down further. So this kind of plays in perfectly with this range right here, which I want to mark out. I want to write a little note in here, hold on. And let's put that towards the bottom. Oh, come on. So top of the selling channel also aligns with where the top of that call wall is. Now we are at the lower Bollinger on the SPY on the 5-minute time frame. If we don't see continued selling all the way down to this 745.68, then this could be a really, really solid opportunity for calls, which I'm actually very tempted to jump into. A lot of these ranges look like they want to close these cups to the upside. Still have about that much range before semis close their cup. So again, we do have the put wall at the 747, which means that we should be trading above it. Okay. So I'm gonna take a call here, just give me 1 second. So I'm going to take this 748. Now I will be looking for a push basically to the 748 again. Now that we have established that there's a put wall at the 747, call wall is at the 750. So again, we should be pulling in between this area for the majority of the day. So I will be looking for that push back upward. HIG is still holding somewhat strong at the 79.72. Volatility was up at the 91.30 something. It's currently at 91.24. Now let's check semis. Semis are kind of also giving us that call opportunity. I have to check because I think there was some bad news, so hold on. Oh no, no bad news. So we did close this large inverse cup, which is not bullish, obviously. And if we pull all the way to the 745.40, that will invalidate this smaller cup. So ideally, I'm looking for a bounce before that. Volatility has ticked upward though. It's currently at 91.57. And it's pulled back down a little bit, so 91.40. HIG is still holding strong at the 79.30 or 73. Now let me just check the gamma again to see if it's shifted any. Nope, it's still the same. So we still have that put wall at the 747, which means that the market should be aiming to push above that. Now we basically wait. Summer is pushed all the way to the 580.34. But again, I still see this as liquidity to push upward towards that 598-ish. We still have this yellow range to close that upward gap on the major cup. So if they're going to do that, they'll need to push upward. Same with QQQ. QQQ has a lot of room in this cup as well. Let me just really line that up. So QQQ still has plenty of room to push as well. Going to delete some of these little boxes because we don't need them. Going to delete this resistance range because basically already tested it. Yeah, I'm sure you're doing really, really well, Mike. Basically bought the 129 and you're up a whole, roughly $7. I still want us to push to the 7 or not 750, but the 150 range on ACN. I'm a little concerned though because technically this looks like a 20 mile rejection, but rejections can easily turn into building support to head upward. So ideally in our situation, I hope that's the case. I hope that this isn't turning into a rejection and going to continue rejecting downward. I don't think it will be just because we are seeing quite a lot of buying this morning. Remember, this company has a market cap of 91 billion, so going from, 129 to 136, almost 137 is a lot of money. So our SPY calls are doing good. Usually I would try to take profit around the 20 ma, but for today I think that today's going to be a push day. At least towards the top of this selling channel. So I will be looking to basically take this call close to the high of the day. But again, we can't ignore that this is a bearish structure, even though overall it's a bullish structure. But this is a bearish structure here. We do have this inverse cup closed. Let me pull this over one more. So we do have the inverse cup closed, but with that said, this is still a very large cup, and this could be a very large handle to that cup. Okay. We're seeing volatility pulling downward. We're seeing the HIG buying back upward. This is kind of the exact price action we were looking for out of semiconductors, even though it pulled way, way down, but it gave us a really good entry on SPY. So everybody's calls, if you did have the opportunity to take them at this range with me, should be doing super, super good. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to drink my coffee and relax and take a couple bites of my breakfast. So I'll be here, but I'll be mute for a moment. I'm gonna write a note down on the screen that I am mute, but I will be here in case anything shifts or if I notice anything, then I'll unmute and, be here. Now again, I'm looking for the 729.23 or above to take our profit. So these calls should be kicking butt for everybody. Anyway, I will be mute just for a few minutes. Now, volatility is still watching, or still dropping, um, while the HIG is still buying upward. So the HIG is at 79.76, volatility at 90.85. Yep, it absolutely could turn into a head and shoulders here. So that's something we have to be very cautious of, especially with this being a bearish structure. This absolutely could be that handle on that structure to continue pulling downward. So something we have to be very, very cautious of. But I personally think it's going to turn into upward buying just based off of the HIG. HIG is at 79.77. Generally don't see continuation of buying in HIG if we're going to be pulling downward. Seeing semis buying up as well. So overall, a lot of good signals, I think. So Joseph, think about this. Even if you have a smaller portfolio, if you only made $20 a day, do that for 10 days and your portfolio is going to be at 200 compared to the 150. Do that again another 10 days after that and it'll be at 400. And then you could try to, get some of these trades where you're getting, 30, 40, $50 a trade. Do that for 10 days. Your account will be at almost 1,000. Rinse and repeat. There's zero reason to rush trades. I think many taking profit at that 748 though was very valid. Now, if we see this smaller cup on the 1 minute time frame close on semis, that will be bullish. So I am looking for that push back to the 588.86 because that would signify very likely we're going to be heading up close to the high of the day. But if we reject this range, then that will be that head and shoulders everybody's looking at. This may not look like a right shoulder, but this absolutely has the liquidity for it. The head, and potentially that right shoulder. So, fully understandable. And then the same on SPY, you know. This could absolutely be that left shoulder, the head, right shoulder. But we are seeing some bullish structure. We're seeing smaller cup here, should form a smaller handle, and we should get the high of the day if everything goes in our favor. I can delete my note. So I'm holding for the glory today. No, but it builds up over time. That's the thing, is that sure, it's like you can go get a job, go work the standard, you know, between 12, 15, 17-ish an hour, whatever it is, and then put that into your portfolio, you know, a couple $1,000s. No big deal. But you could also do some of these trades where you start with a very small account and you could trade, you know, about 30 minutes a day. There's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of symbols out there. So, um, you could do that while you still work. I see many people doing that. I'm sure many of you still work. Um, so you just slowly accumulate and build your portfolio up. A small $20 win here and there. If you do that again 10 days in a row, you could be working a full-time job and still get $20 a day on your stocks, or options or whatever you trade. But the goal is not exactly time. And the thing that I think that a lot of people misunderstand about building a portfolio is that it's basically building a portion of your life. You know, this isn't just working a job. This isn't just providing an income. This is building your retirement, money for your wife and kids or husband and kids. It is something that's just not just a job. It's going to be something that's with you forever. So if you can only make $20 a day, do that. That's fine. The whole point is just get that portfolio growing. Doesn't matter if it's $5 a day, you know? Um, just get that portfolio growing. You're going to be trading essentially the whole rest of your life. Um, so any growth is just going to compound. See, many of you are working right now. Yep. Yeah, and it does all add up. I'm still holding some of the USO calls. They're kind of just a depression option at this point. I'm really upset about that tweet yesterday, let me tell you. Um, Trump saying that there was a resource glut literally right as USO is pushing 115 should be criminal, but I'm not going to go into the politics. But it's wrong that legislators and politicians have the ability to talk about stocks and stuff. That's all I'm gonna say. Hasn't been the only time I've been burned by Mr. Trump. And the way you build this into a full-time job is, you know, slowly building, slowly building. And eventually that slow building will turn into large-scale building. That large-scale building will turn into, okay, I can actually support myself, I can support my family, I could do what I want to do with my life just from trading. And you'll know when that opportunity hits. Um, but it's nothing you have to rush. It's not something you have to rush. I think a lot of people think that they have to rush, um, their portfolio and rush wins and everything else. This portfolio is going to be with you the rest of your life. Doesn't matter if it's through Webull or E-Trade or whoever, you can always transfer it to another broker. So just keep stacking wins. Try to keep your losses very minimal. Hopefully you don't have a stock crash on you like we did this morning, which honestly gave me a little bit of a heart attack, but besides that, but that's how you turn trading into a career. Is you're not going to just WSB, go from a couple dollars to a million. I mean, that can happen for the very, very few, but it doesn't mean they're skilled. Those are gambles. Um, you know, there's the opposite side of those trades where literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people lose money that they can't afford to lose. Um, so stock trading could be very sad, um, because it looks like, when you go to some of these forums and everything that, oh, everybody's winning, everybody's making bank and everything, but there's a lot of people that lose and they continue to lose and they lose money that they can't afford to lose and it causes them to do things that, they can't repair in their life. Um, that's not what we want to do here. We want to build safe trades, make them consistent. Doesn't matter if you're only making 50 bucks that day. It'd be great if you made 1,000 that day, but that's not the goal. Okay, the goal is continued growth. I kind of see portfolios as like a reflection of yourself, you know. You want to continue building upon yourself and growing yourself. Let's see what's going on with the structure here. So this still looks good. Again, we do have to still be concerned about that. This can turn bearish. But our HIG is pushing upward. It's at 79.77. Did hit the 79.78 just for a little bit there. Was at 79.80 for a moment. Back at 79.78. Volatility is pulling downward. So it's at 90.70. So I think we're looking good to push to the high of the day. At least from all of my signals so far. Yep, I'm currently doing 0 DTs. See, I used to do stop losses after percentages, but I like seeing my stock or my options go to multiple hundred percentages or even thousands of percentages. Um, I really like to capitalize on the big wins that I do see. And I think that I'm not going to call it a mistake, but that's something that a lot of newer traders don't capitalize on, is that if you have a very high conviction trade and you have a trade that is going really well and in your favor, there's no reason to cut out. Unless there's an actual, technical or news-driven event to cause you to have to sell that position, there's no reason to get out um, until you hit your level. Sure, you can take some profits, but overall, um, if I just took 50% on some of my options, um, that'd be the difference between the option running about $50 to $70 compared to some of these trades right now where they're literally up, multiple hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. I would not want to give that up. But the duality of that is that, they absolutely can reverse and then all of a sudden you're in the red. Kind of like my ACN trade, even though it's heavily in the green still, but it did get a little spooky this morning. Seeing semis still pushing upward, that's very bullish. Same with QQQ. Should see this out of the SPY as well. We have volatility pushing down further, so it's at 90.67. We have the HIG at 79.79. So I am still looking for this 749.23 or above. So far, I'm just seeing buying to the upside today. Yeah, semi still heavily buying. Tech still buying. It'll happen, and it'll happen. Just keep being diligent. Just keep slowly stacking up the wins, and you will definitely get to that point. Now, what I don't want to see here is what's kind of happening is us having a rejection of this 20 mile. Now, this is the 1 minute time frame, but the rejection of the 20 mile here usually means we're going to the lower Bollinger. Okay. But going to the lower Bollinger on the 1 minute time frame generally means that we'll be bouncing to the upside. What I would like to see though, without us going to that lower Bollinger, would be reclaiming this 20 mile and pushing to the upper Bollinger on the 1 minute time frame. Kind of the same thing for what we got going on with the 5 minute time frame. And we just have to be super cautious because again, this can turn into a head and shoulders. Not seeing that just yet. The Hig is still holding that 79.78, which is very, very bullish to me. 79.79. So we should be at the 1 minute lower Bollinger. Okay. Some might still have some room down if they're going to push that level. Our Hig is holding strong. QQQ also at the lower Bollinger on the 1 minute time frame. Now semis can push basically to that 585-ish range before that upside. Well, I need to go say bye to my daughter really quick. One moment. Sorry about that. I am back. So, while I was gone, the HIG has risen quite a bit. It's at 79.82. That's super, super bullish. The VVIX is at 90.45. So that's dropped from 90.83 if I remember correctly. So we should be hitting the high of the day. Today was the type of day where I really had a lot of conviction in this call. I didn't have conviction in the earlier calls, obviously. Um, but this call right here, I had a lot of conviction in. So was very willing to hold it. Do you have to be careful with semis still? Because even on the 1 minute time frame, this can turn into a head and shoulders. On QQQ 1 minute time frame, we have another cup built, so we can expect a smaller handle before pushing to the upside. SPY, it looks like it's ready to run any minute now. So again, I am looking for this push to the 749.23. Then I'll go ahead and take profit on my call. Do have some room to pull down here prior though, because on the 1 minute time frame we are in the upper Bollinger. So that can work against us slightly. So for semis, we need to see buying all the way back up to this 591 to really invalidate this head and shoulders here. But if we can get that buying, that should push us, well above this 749.23, probably to the 749.50-ish range. QQQ slowly buying upward throughout all of this. Starting to see a little buying out of semis. QQQ still buying. So we should get my level fairly soon here. QQQ, almost at the 720 again. And semi is almost at 590 again. Remember, it needs to push that 591 and some change to really invalidate some of the bearish structure. Volatility at the 90.32. Higgs still at the 79.79. And it looks like we're going to get our push. All right, I'm going to go ahead and sell my contract. I was like 150%, something like that. I don't really care though. It all adds up. So that was a nice win. We're going to mark that down. Now from the top of this, I don't really want to chase anything. Potentially again, there's that room for the puts here. Once we hit that top range, we've also closed this cup, which means that we can start building some bearish structure to head downward. But I'm not too keen on shorting this right now. What I'd rather do, and we did get this cup closed on semis, which is awesome. So it does invalidate not the full head and shoulders, but it's really starting to invalidate it because this is suggesting that we're going to push back up to the 594, basically 595. I'm really looking for this gap to be filled on semis, and then I'll be looking for some short positions within semiconductors after that. So that was a great trade. That worked out really well. No, I haven't hit 100,000 yet. No, no, no. That's gonna be a while. So hopefully everybody was able to do very well in their trade here with these calls. Worked out really, really well. Now again, what we need to be cautious of is that this is the top of a selling channel. One thing that I do want to look at on the daily time frame really quick, which this is going to look like a mess, I do apologize. Let's go ahead and delete that range right now, we don't need it. And we can delete some of these supports. That was for a class. I am tempted to get some dated 720 puts or something like that. If we hit the top of this channel. So let me check some of the expirations. You know, we could do this with TQQQ. There is a huge position on the TQQQ 70 puts for 22 days out. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put a bid in at that 305. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put in a bid for the TQQQ 70 puts on July 31st for that 70 strike. And I'm just gonna keep it at the 305 on the bid, even though that's where everybody else's bids are at right now. But that would catch this move upward. Kind of same with QQQ. That'd catch this move to the upside. Currently it's down right now. Um, it was up as of yesterday, but we had, well, not yesterday, as of what today is? Today is Thursday. As of Tuesday, but a stock that I'm heavily invested in dropped pretty heavily. It went all the way from the 144 down to the 129. So recovering that, currently at 3.6K. So down slightly. Also want to check the UPRO options because that could be a good opportunity as well. So I want to look at July 31st. Oh, those are pretty expensive. Now we could do an SQQ call, or SQQQ, excuse me. I think that's what I'll do. So I'm going to target the SQQQ 40 call for either August 7th or July 31st. I'm going to put a bid in at 114 because that's where everybody else's bids are right now. I'm expecting us to move upward more during the day. Still have room on that selling channel. So the TQQQ 70 puts would be for August 31st or for July 31st, and same with these SQQQ calls. I'm actually leaning towards the SQQQ calls. Um, the 40 strike. Yeah, I'll type it out in chat. currently have a bid at 114, but it's very likely going to have to shift that bid upward. But we'll do so as we, rise during the day. Yeah, you're very welcome. Now my FXY calls are gaining weight. Why is that? Hold on. Not really seeing the yen gain weight so far. Now, as we close in towards this 750 range, I am going to go ahead and put this order in for this SQQQ 40 call. So let's try 217. $217, not yet. Let's try 219. Sorry, I had to mute a second. Random coughing fit. So, not getting at 219. Let's try. I don't like even numbers, but let's try 220. And we'll leave it there. Okay, it did get filled, so that's perfect. Alright, everyone. Usually I'd stream a lot longer today, um, but I'm just not feeling super great. Is there any symbols or anything anybody wants me to look over? Not too keen on taking any sort of 0DT puts right now. The market's very, very bullish. We have the HIG buying upwards, still at that 79.80. Volatility is at 89.97, so it's dropped down all the way from the 91.57. Semis looking bullish. QQQ looking good. SPY's looking very good. Thankfully, ACN is starting to look good again. That candle down to the 129 was pretty scary, let me tell you. I have a lot of positions tied into this right now, so if we get back up to the 140, I'm going to definitely take a put hedge against that. Because that was basically like a $10 drop. Which I'm not keen on. I don't like those unless I'm, shorting. Get spied at 753. Alright. Well, I definitely think it's possible. You have plenty of prior resistance ranges to test. If I could talk right. So you do have some resistance ranges to go through. One specifically at the 751.08 or oh 06, excuse me. It's probably a little less than that, but basically around that range. Then the 752.50, and then remember we do have the call wall at 750, which means that the market almost 100% wants to trade in here today. Our put wall is at that 747, which gives us about $3 range of where the market really wants to be. And what that really means is that when you're above the call wall, that's, you know, basically where dealers are going to start losing money by having those calls exercised. Being below the put wall, kind of the inverse situation. That'd be where those puts start getting exercised. Being in between is right where they want because that's where they are able to sell calls for a lot of premium, sell puts for a lot of premium, and then close it in between where they're going to take the least amount of, having to exercise their positions. So on a day like today, it's a little tough, but I do think the signals are definitely there. We kind of have everything we need within semis to push further, kind of have everything we need in QQQ to push further. Our volatility is dropping, the HIG is continuing to buy. So it looks great. We just have to be cautious because with those call walls, with those put walls, the dealers do respect them very, very heavily. That's literally dealer positioning that we track. So while we might pull above this call wall a little bit, kind of like we did with the put wall, look at what happened with that put wall. We didn't stay below it very long at all. Um, we only stayed below it for about 13, 14 minutes total. So that definitely can happen with the call wall side. You can definitely push above it, but I think that very likely any push above that is going to, you know, lead to pulling back down. So let's look at SoFi, which I'm kind of bummed about because I was going to take a short position on it, I believe. So SoFi, that was that short position I was wanting to take. And this was the other one I was wanting to take right here. which I missed on Monday or Tuesday whenever I had to step away. Anyway, SoFi, daily time frame. You have this massive Head and Shoulders building. Which is not ideal. This is not what you want to see on the daily time frame at all. But at the same time, if we start seeing some good news and positive buying out of SoFi, then this can turn into a cup and invalidate this large Head and Shoulders. Now, with that said, getting into sort of the actual technical aspect, we are below the 200-day moving average, which is extremely bearish. Okay, so this entire range right here, bear territory. Now, with that said, we are currently above the 50-day moving average, which is good. We were in the upper Bollinger, which is why I wanted to short. We have the 5-MA starting to curl back into the 10-MA, which that's a bearish signal. Let's see, 10-MA is at the 1801. So if we close at that 1790-ish range, then the 5-MA will be below the 10-MA. Okay, so the 5-day moving average below the 10-day moving average. That's kind of like the first bearish signal. What I would anticipate from that range is to continue heading down through that 20-MA, pulling the 5-day moving average through the 20-day moving average, which that's the second, very, very bearish signal. And then eventually we'd see the 10-MA start pulling underneath the 20-MA, which would be, another bearish signal. Now, the reason why I'm leaning so bearish on SoFi right now is because with this upper Bollinger move, you generally don't see the market go from upper Bollinger right back to the upper Bollinger. It can happen. We've seen it happen before. But with the positioning of the moving averages, it looks very, very sketchy. Now, the one non-sketchy aspect is that you do have the 20-MA, and let me just mark this really quick. This is below the 50-MA. You see how the 5-day moving average, 10-day moving average, 20-day moving average all pulled above that range. Okay, so that is bullish. Okay, technically right now we do have our moving averages in a bullish stance. So as long as we see buying today above this 1808, it needs to basically close at probably 1820-ish, give or take. But from that 1820, that would pull the 5-day moving average above the 10-day moving average, with some actual conviction. And that's what you want to see. You want to see the 5-MA above the 10-MA, 10-MA above the 20-MA, 20-MA above the 50-MA. But we're still well below the 200-MA. Okay, so it's not really the time to go long. It's not really the time to short either. We have been in a very, very heavily consolidated range right here. And let me just kind of mark this out for a second. But basically from the 14-ish, give or take, 1492, up to about that 20 range, you've been seeing just a lot of chopping in there. Not really quality structure. So it's hard to say to go long on this. And the short opportunity was a few days ago, a few sessions ago. It's not really good to short right now. If you're wanting to go long, you do it within the lower Bollinger. So if we get a push down, then that's when you go long. Yeah, I definitely think that there's room on both sides. And then I usually often play SoFi options. Um, but that's exactly what I do is I will go long on the bottom if I see the lower Bollinger, short the top. These are all ranges I traded. Wanted to trade that one, but missed that by a few sessions by mistake. But we're no longer having this massive sell-off currently, which overall is a bullish signal. But we absolutely can sell towards that 860, which would be, of course, very, very bearish overall. But as long as you continue to take puts at the upper Bollinger, calls at the lower Bollinger, you're going to make a lot of money. This trades pretty consistently. This range in here is a little bit of the outlier, where if you try to take calls at these lower Bollinger moves, you wouldn't have had very much room at all. But even prior to that range, it still likes to trade very consistent. See how you could have shorted there really well, shorted there really well, called on that very, very successfully. These shorts right here would have been absolutely godly. So that's what I'm kind of looking for on SoFi. It's not really in a range to like pick up shares and go long on just yet. Now let's check Nvidia. Now Nvidia, and let me go ahead and delete some of these arrows because I was trying to show this consolidation channel. That's when the consolidation channel started. So we'll keep that up there. So for Nvidia, we did slightly pull back into this consolidation range, but so far we're bouncing out of it. Now with that bounce out of it, that was a really nice lower Bollinger move. We're back at the 20 MA. Now from this 20 MA, we can have a push towards the upper Bollinger. It's been a while since we've had the last upper Bollinger push. Last upper Bollinger push was in May 14th. Now we're below the 50-day moving average. This bounce right here was a bounce literally off of the 200-day moving average. So we see this happen multiple times where it hits this 200-day, bounces, 200-day, bounces a little bit of bearishness in here, but we do pull up through that, pull back down, test the 200-day, bounce, 200-day, bounce. Now, with that said though, we are still currently underneath the 50-day moving average, which is, moderately bearish. We have the 5-day moving average pulling above the 10-day moving average, which is bullish, but those moving averages are both underneath the 20-day moving average, which is bearish. Okay, so there's still a lot of bearishness in this symbol. Because, for example, if we do have some major selling hit Nvidia, which, where's the price right now? The 201.40. So it's basically having the a 20 MA test right now. If we reject this 20 MA to the downside, then that's going to be very bearish because that's very likely telling us that we're heading towards the lower Bollinger, which if we head for that lower Bollinger, we will be basically consumed by that 200-day moving average. But if we bounce from this range, then we should be heading towards that upper Bollinger, which that would turn fairly bullish. Okay, that would pull the 5-day moving average above the 20-day moving average, would slowly be pulling that 10-day moving average above the 20-day moving average, but that's still going to take at least like 7 or 8 sessions as long as we're above this 205, 210 range. But the main thing is that are we going to be able to pull the 5 MA above the 50-day moving average? That's kind of the real main bullish signal that I'm looking for. Because if we're able to do that, then that's telling us that very likely we see the 10-day moving average and 20-day moving average pulling above that range as well, which means that we would no longer be in a downtrend. Okay, we would then start uptrending again, which the uptrend tells us that we could pull all the way back up to the 236.54. You know, there's plenty of upside to be taken here as long as we can break some of these bearish trends on our bearish moving averages. So we're not out of the woods yet, but we're not exactly fully in the woods either. When we're at the 20 MA on the daily time frame, that really kind of opens up both the upper Bollinger and lower Bollinger. So as much as that doesn't tell you a whole lot, hopefully you understand what I'm saying. I'm not just saying, oh, it's going to go up or down. No, no, not at all. Um, a bounce from here is going to be extremely bullish, while a breakdown from this level is going to absolutely tear down NVIDIA, which could be very, very bearish. Okay, we do have this major consolidation range below where we're at right now. And with that major consolidation range, you know, that's telling us that we trade from the bottom of that range to the top, to the bottom to the top. That's what those arrows were representing. So we're not out of that area yet. Okay, it may look like we've bounced out of that area, but a rejection from this range could absolutely tear us down. Now, I want to check the weekly. The weekly is kind of telling us a bad story too. That if we don't have a bounce, that the weekly, uh, 5 MA is going to be pulling underneath the 20 MA, which means that the 5-week moving average will be pulling under the 20-week moving average. That's a very, very bearish signal. Okay. The 50-week moving average, basically the same as the 200 MA. That would be the next step, is pulling underneath that range. So I think it's possible we could be heading down quite a bit, but a rejection or a bounce from here is going to be very, very, very important to determine that. We do have plenty of bearish structure formed, and as you can see on the daily time frame, we do have a head and shoulders starting to build. So if we do head downward, the structure should build outward, and from there, after we consolidate in this range for a little bit, potentially we could be heading downward even further. So, not very good in terms of, expecting major bullishness out of NVIDIA. It does have quite a while to go before we get to that point. Right? Yeah, SoFi is super good for options. And they move really well. The volume on the actual contracts is really high. So, um it's definitely a really good one. Thoughts on Broadcom? Let's check. Let's check Broadcom. Sorry, I have to look through my massive watch list here. Avgo. So for Broadcom, I just want to look at the weekly for a minute. This is looking like it wants to bounce off that 50-day moving average, or the 50 week, which is going to be the same as the 200-day moving average. Kind of the same similar position with Nvidia, only except it's not as um, heavily consolidated across the range like Nvidia was. But on the daily time frame, we see that, let me delete this and delete this so that it doesn't get in the way. But on the daily time frame, we see that the upper Bollinger is right where this 50-day moving average is, which is kind of telling us a really bad signal. Because what happens when we get to the upper Bollinger? Usually we pull down. So this is already kind of telling us that we're going to have a rejection of this 50-day moving average very likely. And a rejection of that range, is going to keep consolidating the Bollinger Bands. We see how it's expanded very heavily in here, heavily expanded to the bottom, and then now it's starting to consolidate. So once we push that level, which that level is at the 405.81. So essentially if we close above the 406, 407 range today, we'll be pushing that level. And with the day 2 higher high of the upper Bollinger, again this move is extremely extended. This is usually not how upper Bollinger moves work. Usually you get the 2 bars, 2 candles above the upper Bollinger, and then it starts to pull back. So that's kind of what I would anticipate here as well, is pull up, day 1, close above the level, day 2, get that higher high, and then start to consolidate downward. Now that downward consolidation means that while we would have the 5-day moving average and 10-day moving average pulling above the 20-day, they would not be pulling above the 50-day moving average. They would be eventually rejecting back down. Which that means that might be trying to expand the downside further. So, not exactly bullish. And we do have a cup that we can close here. Basically at this 414. Let me mark that. Basically at this 414, we have a cup we can close. But that is well above the upper Bollinger right now, which means that very likely we're not going to close that cup. Very likely we're going to pull close to it and then start rejecting. Now that doesn't mean this rejection doesn't pull down slightly, do some form of 5-mile retest, and then pull back up. That absolutely can happen, but it's not looking super great right now. And usually within that upper Bollinger is when we short. So overall this is not looking bullish. Okay, this is in fact looking fairly bearish. I think that any pull to the upside is just going to give us additional bearish liquidity to grab that 50-day moving average and then start heading back down again. And heading back down again would pull us below that 200-day moving average. Kind of the same thing with Nvidia, which obviously would be super, super bearish. Especially if we see the Bollingers expand, which I think they will if we do get the upper Bollinger push here. The lower Bollinger would be expanding even further to the downside. So that might mean that we pull all the way down to this range. That would be extremely, extremely bearish. that would form a head and shoulders. And that would start pulling our 5-day moving average below that 200-day moving average. So, not out of the woods yet. Standing in the woods slightly, a little more so than NVIDIA. But you do want to wait for that upper Bollinger to short. Okay, this isn't the time to short it just yet. You would wait for that upper Bollinger range to be hit to short the second day, day 2. And from that, it'd be probably a fairly quality short. Yeah, I can take a look at ACI. Hold on. Would you take a put on SPY once the call wall is breached? Absolutely. So let's go back to the SPY here. So once this call wall is breached, and I want to turn off the moving average so it's not a mess. This is the perfect range to be taking puts at, especially on the 5-minute time frame. If we can get that push to the upper Bollinger, that'd make it even better. But when we're above the call wall, that's telling us one thing, that we're very likely not going to be staying above that range for very long. Okay? Because again, this is where dealers don't want to close above. Now this call wall can shift, but so far it hasn't. So far it's still at this 750, which means that dealers are going to get burned and lose money if we close above that range, which is telling us kind of a big signal, right? It's telling us that very likely we're going to pull down. So that's what I would expect. And that's the big reason why I do expect a rejection off the top of the selling channel. Because again, that's right where that call wall's at. Now I can take a look at ACI, but there's not a whole ton to look at just yet. Or no, I was thinking ACN, ACI, a little different. So ACI here, we're seeing something I don't want to see, which is, I wish my Weeble would not put that big gray box in front of where I'm trying to draw, so I can't draw. But this is potentially a rejection off of the 20-day moving average. Okay, but at the same time, this can also be a 5-MA and 10-MA test. Okay, and usually to retest the level, you want to test the upper bounds of the level and the lower bounds. Now, it works a little differently on some of these smaller stocks, but the general rule of thumb is you usually want to look for $1 to $2 above and below that level. So while we have retested the 20-MA, we do have a little rejection of it, but that doesn't mean that we're actually rejecting the level. That just might be that we're actually just coming back to retest the 5-MA and the 10-MA, basically pulling towards that $1 to $2 above and below that range. From there, we can start heading upward. If we continue getting a rejection to the downside, then that's going to, basically kill the position and tell us that we're going back to the lower Bollinger. But the other thing we need to look at is that ACI has been pushing underneath the 50-day moving average and the 200-day moving average for quite a long time now. Doesn't mean we can just start flying up to the upside and reclaim everything. But we have been in a selling posture for an extremely long period. Okay. Basically, all this range has been just selling to the downside. But even with that downside selling, what do you see in here? You see how we go from the upper Bollinger to the lower Bollinger to the upper Bollinger, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So, we just left the Lower Bollinger. Not too long ago, anyway. And we're starting to build a little bit of somewhat bullish structure in here. It's not entirely bullish just yet, but it's starting to get to that point. So, are we going to be pulling from the upper or the lower Bollinger to the upper Bollinger? I think that's, a very likely potential. But as you can see within a range like right here, how we get from the lower Bollinger to the 20 mile and then 20 mile into further rejection. So that can happen. Okay, that can happen on ACI as well. But I do think that these are overall trying to retest the 5-day and 10-day moving averages before we cross that 20-day moving average and start heading to the upside. That's what it looks like to me. Now for SoFi, how far do you buy out contracts for? Um, it really just depends on the expirations. I think they're usually about 7 to 2 weeks out, might be monthly. But I usually buy, I usually try to get these type of positions for about a month out. Doesn't always happen. Um, Sometimes you have to take a position that's like 2 weeks out because of the expiry, but it is what it is. I try to take a lot of positions about a month out though, unless it's a, zero DTE type trade. Alright, everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. Now, tomorrow's stream should be a little longer, but I am going on vacation tomorrow as well. Um, so I might have to pack some stuff in the morning if I don't get it all packed tonight. I'll try to make sure I'm all prepared tonight so that I can stream a little further. But with that said, I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day. If there's no other questions, then I'll go ahead and end today's stream. And very likely starting next week, I am going to be trying to put out the daily videos of going over the SPY, sort of what I'm expecting, what levels are important, all that good stuff. So those will be quick 10-15 minute videos, and I'll put those out Monday through Friday. So along with the Sunday videos, even though nobody watches them. But with that said, have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you tomorrow.